Everybody, I'm Doglightning, and I'm here to give you guys the AP on hit NEEKO build guide. If you saw my 80 NEEKO guide from before where I had an AP section at the end, I wasn't very fully sure and utilized on all the builds back then, but I feel a lot better about them now, so like, comment, subscribe to promote my content, and let's begin. So our first AP on hit build we're going to be going through is the burst build. So this build is very similar to any normal burst AP NEEKO build, but instead of it just being like a normal AP build, we're going to be mixing in a Nashor's Tooth and our Hail of Blades. So the reason why Hail of Blades is so good on NEEKO is her empowered auto. If the enemy tries to trade into you, if you're in a solo lane, or if your support in bot lane goes in and you don't have your empowered auto ready, Hail of Blades will guarantee you get your empowered auto off. Another cool thing about Hail of Blades is if you have your empowered auto ready and you go in for a trade, you use your empowered auto with Hail of Blades, and now you have another empowered auto, and you can get 2 empowered autos off in a trade. That's why it's so good. I'll be going into the items in a sec, but for instance, the reason why I go Triumph here is because with this build, we're going to be going Everfrost, which means we're going to be lacking sustain, and Triumph will give us that sustain where if we go in for a one-shot in a team fight, we can get the sustain off and come back. So for the runes, we got Hail of Blades, Taste the Blood for some sustain. You can go Cheap Shot, but I feel like the damage is so negligible, and NEEKO is a low-range champion who gets poked, and I feel like Taste the Blood is just too good on her. Eyeball Collection for some AP stacking. It's going to be hard to really stack these efficiently. Eyeball Collection is the way to go. And then finally, I go Treasure Hunter because it's just 550 free gold, and it just really helps with a build that really needs like some expensive items. But you can go, because this build's going Everfrost, you could go Ingenious Hunter if you want to reduce its cooldown. If you want to roam a lot, you can go Relentless Hunter or Ultimate Hunter if you think you're going to be ulting a lot. But I personally go Treasure Hunter because gold is gold. I love gold. It's also partly why I go Triumph in this build. Again, we need some HP sustain, but also the 20 gold per takedown will be about 300 gold a game, which means with this and Treasure Hunter, you're making about 850 gold a game, and Alacrity to give us some sustain attack speed. Alrighty, so the itemization for the burst build NEEKO AP on hit. So really quickly before we get into it, I want to go over the ability order because it does differ a bit from the ability order of the other builds. So to start off, you have your W or Q level 1, depending if you're in a lane where you can auto attack, trade, or not level 1. It doesn't really matter depending on the lane. So you'll usually be getting your either Q or W into your E. This is where the build really differs. So in a lot of on-hit builds, you're going to be maxing W first for getting the more empowered auto attack damage off. In this build, we are focusing on burst, and it's more playing NEEKO like an AP style. We're actually going to be maxing our Q first. Q is the first ability we're going to be maxing. After that, it might sound weird, but usually you're used to always maxing E. A couple patches ago, they buffed NEEKO's W, where it actually does almost as much damage per point as an E. So each point in it is increasing its damage from 50 to 80. That's 30 damage per point. Her E is actually 35 damage per point, which means if you get one empowered auto off, which, by the way, you can't miss, right? You can miss your root, and you can't miss your W. So basically, hitting your root or hitting your W is almost equivalent in damage per level, except with Hail of Blades and the attack speed we're building, you're probably going to be getting multiple Ws off, making W better. You might be wondering why this is better than rank 1 root, because you want a longer root duration. Well, there's a couple reasons for this. So the first reason for this is because we're going Everfrost, and the big thing is that with Everfrost rush, which is what we usually rush with this build, is that we don't need bigger than a rank 1 root. So say usually you go for the ER, but then the root ends and they get out of it and they escape your R. But we got Everfrost, so since we have Q max and W max, we can still go for our E ulti Everfrost. The Everfrost keeps them in the ulti and they can't escape. So we're basically leaving root at rank 1 with this build, but because of the Everfrost, we're basically using that to extend the duration of the E while still getting the benefits of increasing our DPS with W. W gives you more move speed and better kiting. So we're getting the benefits of all 3 abilities being maxed basically because of Everfrost, but we're able to get the better abilities that give you damage. So anyways, time for the ability, how we play this build. So first of all, like I said with the Hail of Blades, the cool thing is if your support goes in, you don't have your empowered auto ready, right? You got do, and boom, you got your empowered auto off because of the Hail of Blades. And if your support, whoopsie, maybe I should have got it. Mess it up. If you have your empowered auto already ready, right, and your support goes in, or your mid lane or whatever, and you go in, you got your 3 autos, boop, 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 and then you have your empowered auto at the end to go off at the end, right? So that's why Hail of Blades works so well. So for this build, you are usually going pen boots. It might sound weird. You might be thinking attack speed boots. Trust me, I've done damage testing. Pen boots out damages attack speed boots with this build. So we got our Everfrost, attack speed boots into Nashor's Tooth. This is the core of the build. After these items, you can really build whatever you want, just standard AP NEEKO. This is the core, and the idea is now we can go for our auto attacks, and we have this sustained DPS in a durability update where people aren't necessarily dying in a one-shot. We now have a bit better sustained DPS. After this, like I said, you can basically pick from any of these AP items here that you want. Death Cap will be the biggest damage increase, but a lot of games you're going to be wanting to go Zanya's for the survivability. But if you want basically best damage, right, a build like this would be like your best damage, but pick whatever you want. This is the idea of the AP burst. And again, the real idea of this page is that you're not going necessarily to be killing tanks with this build, right? This build is to kill squishies. If you're trying to kill tanks, look at the other builds. The idea is you're going for burst. So you're going in for your EQ, Ulti, Everfrost, and then you have your Halo Blades go boop, 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 and like kill them, right? So yeah, that's the idea. Again, I'll show you again, for instance, right? You go hit your EQ, you have your Halo Blades, right? Just like really good burst with this build in general. So yeah, that's the burst build, and now we'll go on to the sustained DPS builds for AP on hit. Alrighty, so now that we did the burst page, time to go for the sustained DPS AP on hit build. So for the sustained DPS AP on hit build compared to the burst, there's a couple of tweaks. Most of this page will stay the same, but it's the Q and the lethal tempo. So lethal tempo and PTA are both good depending on what you want to do. Lethal tempo will give you the best scaling, but your early game will be a bit weaker, where PTA will give you the most kill pressure in lane, but will scale a bit worse. So it really just depends on the lane. If you have like a kill lane, or your support wants to go in, or if you think you'll just be AFK farming, you can pick between the two of them, but they're both very good. I try to greed lethal tempo whenever I can, just because it's fun, honestly, getting more attack speed and stuff. But yeah, those are the two options for there. And then you're down here, again, it's the options are Q and cut down depending if you are facing a tank or squishies and what you're trying to do. Again, usually you're going this build if you're facing tanks, so I guess more likely than not you'd be doing this. And another big difference between this page and the burst page is that we're going presence of mind now instead of triumph, because in this build we'll actually be getting Riftmaker eventually, and the Riftmaker will be our sustain. So we're not going to need the triumph for sustain. And instead we're taking presence of mind, because again we're taking Riftmaker, and instead we're basically trading out, right, HP sustain for mana sustain. So because we're not getting a mana mythic, we're going to be going for presence of mind. For our secondary runes, I like to take conditioning overgrowth, because NEEKO is very squishy and kind of low range with her spells and stuff, and you're going to be wanting to run into the enemy team trying to hit ultis and things, and getting the extra like survivability is really good, especially because in this build you're going to really want to try and avoid as best you can not to get Zhonya's early, because it extremely hard lowers your DPS, and again this game build's all about DPS. If you're going for burst, Zhonya's isn't bad with the Halo Blades build to get earlier, but in this build we're trying to like stop and get it later. So yeah, this is the sustained DPS page, and now I'll show you guys the items. For the sustained DPS in this one, you are going to be wanting to max your W first compared to the Q. We're not going for as much as bursty plays as we were before. Now we're going for a more traditional W max into E max, because we're building a build that's based off just sitting back and hitting auto attacks and DPSing the enemy, and we want to keep them off of ourselves with long roots and being able to keep auto attacking from afar. After that, obviously, finally we'll max our Q. Now for this build, one thing I want to note, if you skip to this part or if you watched it, is for the burst build you're usually starting with a Doran's ring to help you with some mana sustain, because you're taking Q and maxing Q and using it a lot. With this build, we're basing it off of our auto attacks. So with this build, you're going to want to be either starting with Longsword 3-pot, or you're going to be wanting to start with a Doran's Blade 1-pot, depending on whether or not you are, depending if you're building Wit's End or not. So in this build, you can go Wit's End second, or you cannot. If enemy team has a lot of magic damage dealers, you want to go Wit's End with Longsword with 3-pot, because it'll give you the best lane phase possible. But if you don't think you're going to be getting Wit's End, you will not be building an item with Longsword, then it's good to go Doran's Blade starting with 1-pot. Now the reason why you want to start with an AD item in this build compared to the AP on hit build is because we are building lethal tempo, PTA, and we're going to be building a lot of attack speed to start, and the Doran's Blade actually converts your what's it called? Your adaptive damage into AD, right? So if you didn't have this right here, your adaptive damage is actually now AP. It makes it harder to CS. It gives you less value out of having lethal tempo, out of having press the attack, because it's not wanting to like these runes want you to auto attack a lot. So yeah, we're gonna be doing that. And to start off with this build, the first item we are going to be building is, you guessed it, Nashor's Tooth. Nashor's Tooth is the first item we are building in this build, because we are going for sustained DPS. But actually, back up, boots. The first thing you rush in this build is actually your boots, always. Just rush your boots. And again, this is why we want to get our Doran's Blade or our Longsword start, because we want to be converting our adaptive damage into AD. The reason we're going for boots is because we need to stack our lethal tempo, or we need to stack our PTA faster. These runes really synergize with building attack speed. You might wonder why I don't build the recurve bow first. Well, it's because just simply put, Berserker Greaves for 100 more gold gives 35 attack speed, and this gives 25. So you're getting an extra 10% attack speed and also all that move speed. The 15 damage on hit is okay, but I've tested it, trust me. Berserker Greaves will give you the best DPS, plus the move speed is really nice, and you can use this attack speed to start to stack up your lethal tempo quicker, because getting your lethal tempo up quickly is all that matters with this build, right? So we're getting our attack speed boots, into then our recurve bow is how we're going to be starting this build. So we're going to be starting off the game basically like an ADC, which the cool thing about this is if you're playing this build in the top lane, you can trick the enemy top lane. The cool thing about this build really quickly is when I played this build top is you build these, and if the enemy aid top starts spamming armor items, right, well, all of a sudden you're going AP and they just built armor. But on the flip side, if the enemy top laner starts spamming magic resist because they are like, oh, it's a NEEKO, he's building MR and not looking at your items, you can go Bork, right? So with this like path here, and same with bot lane or mid lane, doesn't matter. With this path here, you're very flexible where you can take this build and you can just pivot into AD on hit and go this into like a Kraken Slayer or a Shield Bow or something, right? But you can also pivot this build into AP. So now that we got our one item spike, now this is where the build will differ a lot. Compared to the burst, it's very linear. This build is very adaptive. You have to be really adaptive to how you build it. So after our Nashor's Tooth, there's a couple options. If we start off the game with a longsword, we're going to be going Wit's End next. We're always going to be going Riftmaker third or second, right? So we can either be going Wit's End into Riftmaker, at which point we do a ton of sustain damage, we have decent burst damage, and ton of attack speed, and we're doing a lot of damage. If you don't need Wit's End because they don't have like mages or assassins or anything like that, after the Nashor's Tooth, you can go Riftmaker, but I strongly suggest waiting to get Riftmaker, or after Nashor's Tooth you can go Riftmaker. I strongly suggest going Riftmaker third, just because it's not very efficient to get second. It's giving you 70 AP with only an 8 AP mythic bonus. If you think about it, you can get like 65 AP from Zhonya's for 2600 gold, so it's not going to increase your DPS by that much to go Riftmaker. That being said, if you do choose the Riftmaker route, I would recommend getting Blasting Wand into Amped Tome. The 5% Omnivamp here is kind of a bait. It doesn't matter that much until later. I would recommend getting these to not stunt your early game. This is again giving you 60 AP, almost the full value. And then, you know, you stump into your build and you get these items that kind of suck, but they're kind of whatever. Well, they don't suck, but they're whatever. What I would recommend before Riftmaker is, if you can, you can't always get away with it. If you need the sustain, go for it. But if you can, Rabadon's Death Cap. Nashor's Tooth plus Death Cap, like, you are going to be doing an insane amount of burst damage and sustain damage, and this is like exactly what you want. If you can read out the Nashor's Tooth Death Cap and get Riftmaker third, great, that's like perfect. And then you're always basically like, there's basically never a reason why you wouldn't be going your Zhonya's fourth, because this item is just too good, obviously, for NEEKO, where you can ulti Zhonya's and then you come out of the Zhonya's and the whole enemy team's stunned and you can kite backwards and use your abilities, right? So yeah, this is the general build. Again, you can mix things around, right? You can basically add in any of these AP items. You don't really want to be mixing in any of these AD items or attack speed. Your main reason why I say you try to greed out the lethal tempo is you got attack speed boots, Nashor's Tooth, lethal tempo. That'll give you all the attack speed you need. If you took PTA earlier, it'll kind of stunt your scaling a little bit, but it's still fine. You don't really want to be going in. And one thing that people always ask me on my stream, which, by the way, come to my stream, TTV Doglightning, twitch.tv Doglightning, is a common question that I get is, people are like, oh, what about Ginsu's or Runons? Trust me, I've tested, they're just DPS losses for this build. Like, the Runon's bolts are doing 40% of your physical damage. We're not building physical damage. And Rage Blade is kind of just like, it's really bad. To put it simple, you can see the damage it's doing is 40 on-hit damage. It scales with building crit, and because it's the only crit item in your build, it's just scaling really, really terribly compared to any other build. You can see that my Nashor's Tooth right now is doing 122 damage, and this is doing 40 damage per hit. Just not worth it. So trust me when I tell you, the main build is you want, Nashor's Tooth, Death Cap, Riftmaker. These are the core. If you need it, you can add in the Wit's End if you need magic resist. If you don't need magic resist, you can go something like a Void Staff or something like that. But yeah, this is in general my NEEKO AP on hit builds. If you have any questions, let me know down below. And other than that, like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate you guys watching the video. And peace.